Salutations, Shades, and welcome back to your one-stop shop for all things strange and unusual, Talking with Shadows, the conversations everyone has, but no one wants to admit to. Here with your host, Marcus D, and joining me in the studio today from our last episode, and still hanging around here in the studio, my good buddy, Frank Hessian. Welcome to the studio, man. Thank you.
Yeah, good to still be here.
Good to still be here because Vic is still sick. What's wrong with you, man? That's what. Why would you say that?
He's getting better.
Yeah, I know he is. Yeah, I'm just messing. I'm so happy. I'm like, you're here because Vic's sick. I'm like, no. Yeah, that's true. Vic is feeling a lot better, guys. I actually had to take him to the urgent care because he was refusing to go for like the longest time, but he finally broke down and went. He does not have COVID. He did get his COVID test back, and that is negative. But he's got some sort of respiratory issue, but he is on the mend. He is almost, I would say, like back to his 100%, but he still needs a day or two to recover. So I invited Frank back into the studio today with me because he joined me last time when we were talking about the Dragon's Triangle as we continue our awesome talk on mysterious disappearances. How have you been doing, Frank? And how's your week been?
Oh, it's been crazy. I mean,
been great. Mine too, man. I actually got exposed to COVID at work earlier in the week, and I actually had to go get a test yesterday. I got my results back. Thankfully, they were negative, so I didn't really have any symptoms. So I was happy to hear that. But I missed my roast battle in Louisville that I was supposed to be going to, and that bummed me out because this was like the worst time that I could get told. But yeah, but I'm glad that it came back negative, and I'm glad Vic's feeling a whole lot better.
Yeah.
Actually, he's tomorrow, because I know we're getting close to the end of the month. Tomorrow, I'm going to be recording an episode with another awesome favorite host of ours, the Libertarian guitarist.
Oh.
Yeah, for those of you that may remember, he actually joined me for a talk on Bob Lazar, and he's going to be coming back on talking about another awesome episode, but I don't want to spoil it quite yet, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I found a way to combine his interests with my interests, and it's going to be an awesome, fun episode.
There you go.
But on to the more important things. Alcohol. Today, I am drinking one of my favorite alcohols. It is from Brown Country Winery, apple wine. Oh, Vic's not here to stop me from taking too much of this.
There you go.
Absolutely. What are you drinking today, man?
Today, I'm having Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey by the name of Chicken Cock. And I'll show you the bottle right here so you can see that's exactly what it says.
That's exactly what it says, too. That's awesome. Oh,
Chicken Cock. So, excuse me while I sample some of this.
And the rest of our middle school minds just snickered to ourselves. Oh, this is good. Dude, I love any alcohol with apple in it. It is just in my top faves.
I was a really big fan of ciders. And I got to say, like, the sweeter ones to me always kind of ruin out, I don't know, some of that apple flavor. Like it's like the sugar gets to be a little bit too much. So it's like you got to find certain ones, man. They have that really good balance.
No. Oh, the sweeter the alcohol, the better for me, man. I love it. Drinking apple wine is like drinking grown-up apple juice. It is just straight delicious.
Oh, well, there you go. This is
yeah. How's yours taste, by the way? How is the chicken cock? I hope this doesn't get like us like an adult, like mature rating on Apple for that, but
yeah. Well, no, it shouldn't. It's got a rooster on the bottle. I mean,
it is a rooster that is on the bottle.
Yeah, and I showed the thing to the camera. I don't know if that's going to be on you.
Well, it's not going to be on the audio, but
yeah, but the but it tastes very, very good. It's got a little bit of a bite to it, so there's probably a little bit of rye in there. But I mean, it's got a very good body to it. I mean, it's got those oaky notes for sure. The sweetness is more like a brown sugar, less like cherry. So I like that.
This is what happens when Vic's away and Marcus and Frank will play. That is, he's not here. He's not here to dictate the content. I get a whole lot more control over what we do. So we got to do some weird stuff that he would normally stomp his feet about. But that's okay. He'll be back and he'll get to get some more input here soon. But we do actually, guys. He appreciated all of the well wishes that everybody has given him. So he appreciates it so much, and we appreciate you here of all the support that you guys have given him because we know that Vic's going through a hard time. So,
well, to your health, Vic. To your health.
To your health, man. I'll drink to that. So, all right. So let's go over some comments, man. You actually get to be here for the comments and respond to some of the stuff that people said about our episode. So, I'm going to start with a patron comment. Chill 7509 says, I'm like you, Marcus. I don't think there is one single answer. I think it's definitely multiple things overlapping. Personally, I say it's ranging from as yet to be explained natural phenomenon to an unknown / assumed extinct creatures to possibly even some kind of intentional interference, possibly a civilization of unknown origin or at the very least an agency of unknown purpose. But to me, the last is a bit of a reach. However, on the flip side, you could counter certain issues such as water pressure, magnetic fields, or whatever else keeps us out of these areas, wherever we, regular citizen, can't go. Is the perfect place to hide something. You know, and I agree with you for a little bit. You know, this is kind of, this is, I find it incredibly funny. It's like when we were talking about our flat Earth, me and Vic's flat Earth video that we were doing. We were talking about like that the best place to hide stuff is where we can't go, and one of the best arguments against that the Earth's not flat is, oh, you could just go to the poles, you could go to you could go out to some of these places to see it for yourself. What average person can actually make it out to the South Pole? Now I'm not arguing that there's flat. I'm gonna put that out there immediately. But like you could take cruises, but I still think it'd be really hard for you to know exactly where you're at. It's not like you could just casually just go out there. So it's 100% possible to hide. There are places in the world that's very difficult just for the average person to go.
Yeah, and I mean, like with that, I mean, hell, look at this past year. We got like 3 million billionaires or whatever. Like not 3 million, but 3 of the million / billionaires who've shot themselves up into space just to come back down. And I'm like, you know what they're doing, right? They got spooked. They had to actually see. What does it look like?
I don't know. During that whole endeavor, we always talk about like the rich and elite, and they know more than we do. I'm like, what do they know that's causing them all to want to leave? That's starting to get kind of scary to me. Let's see. LaWanda Cooper said, well, there's triangles in all of the oceans and lakes and rivers. I think that the creeks might have one somewhere because of all the Great Lakes and the seas is what they really are. I think so too. I think if you look, well, if a river is large enough to, you'll also start running into a lot of weird like disappearances. Like disappearances occur along the river, as well as a lot of other just weird paranormal phenomenon. Like if you just like me and Vic have for a long time talked about doing a documentary. And if we did, one of the things that we would do is just strange stuff on the Ohio River, because there is just a plethora of weird stuff that goes on.
Yeah. One of my favorite series to watch whenever I was getting my undergrad was River Monsters with Jeremy Wade, because that dude would actually go fishing and he'd pull out these like whenever people wrote about like there being like sea dragons or creatures in the shores or something like that, and they were like, and this thing like ate one of the children, and people were like, nah, that's not real. It's like that. Like that's just those weird 1500s exaggerated tales. And like he pulls out some of these fish, and it's like a 300-pound catfish, and I'm like, no, absolutely. That sucker could totally eat a kid. Like that sucker could totally like devour somebody. So like to me, like I think like whenever you think about like river, people always think about the surface, man. What's down there? Like, what's at the bottom, and what's it mutated into? How many eyes does it got? You know, all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah. Jerry Young says, good episode topic. Are these areas actually triangle in shape, or is it just easy to find 3 spots that we connect that encompass the area? I think that it's because I looked into this, that it is just the easiest way. That's like the fewest points that you need to really kind of like encompass an area. I mean, I guess that they could throw a 4th one on there. I mean, I've seen that sometimes too. But I think that's the reason why these all tend to be triangle. That's my best guess.
No, I think you're absolutely right with that, because like with the triangular formation, you only need 3 points of contact, and then you can roughly just say within these boundaries, this is where the nonsense happens. But as we said with the Dragon's Triangle, those boundaries are always flexing, always shifting.
Yep. Let's see. Jay the Phoenix says, maybe the methane capsizing boats isn't widely discussed because of the cruise industry. Some people think the Forest Service government doesn't speak up much about missing people because they would hurt tourism industry. 100% agree with you, Jay the Phoenix. I absolutely do.
Love that thought. Love that thought.
Absolutely. I'm 100% with you that they do not want to tell people the dangers of some of these because it would just scare people. Now, I will play devil's advocate on this because of, you know, yes, it's true that disappearances occur in the triangles, but at the same time, planes do and ships go through them all the time. So the number, like the percentage of them that disappear is still very small. So you're probably right that they happen, but they don't want a few instances to scare people away from getting on these cruise ships. Ooh, Wanda Cooper actually has a really good one, and I was excited to bring this one up. And they said, and she says, yeah, there's a mountain. There's a mountain in Arizona that has a triangle, and there's a triangle that's in Nevada and California also. Like areas specifically, like in some of the desert and mountainous areas where people tend to go missing as well. I think that's 100%. That's true. I think that it's. I think a lot of those are also they're also in national parks, but don't hold me to that yet. But that's my guess. So I would be very interested to look into like some of like the thoughts on what might cause people to be disappearing in some of these more like deserty areas where people can't get found. I'd be interested in looking at that.
We can always talk to my wife on that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
She grew up near Phoenix, so so I mean that's one of those things where she has repeatedly talked to me about like that idea that people would just go, out into the desert and you never see them again. So it's like, well, I mean, granted, we can imagine dehydration. Of course, they just die, and then after severe bleaching from the sun, everything just gets cooked until it crumbles. I mean, I can see that happening to a degree, but I don't know, man. Something kind of eerie about the area as well. Something kind of spooky.
Absolutely, but again, if we're looking at the national parks, I don't want to super get into it. The one I'm saving for when we do Missing 411 because me and Vic are going to tackle it, but we've talked about that for a long time. So that is definitely one that we're only going to do together, guys.
Yeah.
But eventually, we will get there. We will get there because we do have some interesting thoughts on that. So today's episode, me and Frank talked about some different ideas for this episode. I was trying to come up with some interesting things to talk about, and one of the things that came up when I was looking at some topic ideas, and this isn't even one that me and Vic have ever really talked about, is the disappearing object phenomenon. Like I haven't even talked to Vic on some of his thoughts on this. And if you're not familiar with the disappearing object phenomenon, you probably actually are. You just didn't know that there was like a legit name for it. Like I didn't know that there was a name for this in general. And it's weird because a lot of times with the paranormal, like there's whole like there's weird phenomenon that have like whole names of fields of study. You would just be surprised. But there's this whole concept talking about where people will have these stories where either an object that they were recently interacting with that they either put it there all the time, like it's in a particular place where it's supposed to be, or they just recently just set it down. They turn their back for a minute and they come back to it and it's gone. It's not there anymore. It's not a case of just just misplacing things. It's that you just put it there, or it's supposed to be there and it's gone. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. And I, hand to God, had an experience of this today, 15 minutes before the episode. Hand to God. I was getting ready to do the episode with you, Frank, like I really was, and I went and I'm like, oh crap, because this is always my fault. Vic always remembers to get the alcohol, and I always forget. And I'm like, oh crap, I need to get alcohol. So I went to my fridge to see what was in there, and I'm searching for it, and I find this bottle of Brown County Winery, the apple wine. Now, for those of you that listen, will probably remember an episode, and I can't remember how long ago this was, but there was an episode in which I was drinking this, and I took it to Vic's house, I drank it, and then I brought it back home, and I know that I did, and I put it in the fridge, and I forgot about it. Last week, whenever we recorded our episode, I went to see what alcohol we find. Did not see this. If there was apple wine in the fridge, I guarantee you that's what I would have picked. But I searched that fridge for a good while, trying to see what was in there, and I did not see this wine. I freaked out 15 minutes before the episode. I went back to the fridge, and there it is, staring me in the face, plain as day, down to the bottom right corner where we keep all of our alcohol. Freaked the hell out of me.
I gotta say, I mean, hate to have the phenomenon happen to you so close to the podcast, but I mean, what an excellent example to be able to share with everybody.
I'm serious. And if people listen to the podcast, or listen to us a lot on YouTube, understand that I am way more skeptical than Vic, and I'm also way better keeping track of my stuff. But that's neither here nor there. And kind of like, this really happened.
Well,
where this alcohol just was not there last week, and and it's there. I mean, it's not like this, and it's not like you just casually just get alcohol. That I just casually get alcohol out to do this. And I remember there's the same amount of alcohol in it that was in it when I put it back in, because I remember there was about a glass when I put it back in there, because I love this wine that much. Have you ever had that happen to you, where have you had this phenomenon happen to you before?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, as far as recent examples, I mean, trying to think. See, I know whenever I was a child, it happened all the time. And not because I was a kid and I was careless, but it happened all the time because my mom she was so accustomed to things disappearing in our home where we lived, that we regularly would pray to Saint Anthony. Now, granted, we're not Catholic, so I'm not really sure exactly how safe that is to be praying to the saints when you're not Catholic. I don't know. But if I remember correctly, Saint Anthony was the finder of lost things. And so it was the whole idea that things are known to disappear. So the fact that there's even a saint to actually help you find stuff that's gone kind of tells me that this phenomena, just it's been around for a while.
It's funny how a crisis will cause people to just start praying to any divine or supernatural.
For real.
If it's bad, if you're a student that's got has lost something really important for your studies, you'll start going through the gamut of people relatively quickly.
Yeah. And granted, there are certain times whenever for example, I'll unload groceries and I'll be going through it. And granted, this phenomenon occurred where I knew I bought it. I actually bought three bottles of the same thing, and it's not alcohol. It was just vitamin D, because I'm very white and need that vitamin D. But I bought 3 bottles, paid for 3 bottles. It was on the receipt. Got home, started unpacking it. 2 bottles. And I was like, what? And then I was like, man, that's some shit. And I was like, it's probably out in the car, probably somewhere else. Went and took the vitamins that I did have, put those in the bathroom, came back out to the bag to get the other stuff out of the bag. Third bottle's now in the bag. And I was just like, okay, I guess maybe it got obscured by something in here, but whatever, like there it is.
It's so weird to me that how, like, because you've talked about so much on this podcast about like particular types of paranormal phenomenon that happen. Like me and Vic talk about this all the time, where people will tell me, well, I'm a skeptic, but let me tell you this story.
Yeah.
And they'll immediately tell me something about a ghost or a weird UFO light that they saw. Like it's usually or some sort of ghost. But like this particular phenomenon is something that happens to way more people than I think than I even realized when I was looking into it. Like, so common phenomenon this seems to happen up with people, and like I was just, it's really like normally when you're giving like examples of like stuff in the paranormal, there's these really like cool like intense stories, but some of these are just so mundane. I mean, it's not like it's most of the stories you're ever going to find about this are not just some sort of like, oh yeah, I was asleep in my bed and there was a beam of light and I was abducted by aliens,
right?
Or I was out in the woods and here's this monster. Like it's just something that's just so mundane, usually in your house, where like something's not where it's supposed to be, and it's super unsettling when this happens to you. Like it's always like, I went to find my razor blade. I always leave my razor blade on the right of the sink. I go, it's not there. I search for 15 minutes to my house, like my bathroom apart, it's not there. But then I go back and it's the razor blade sitting there on top of like a white napkin that I did or a white towel that I didn't put there before. My wife was telling me an interesting story about how one time at her work, when she worked at the old courthouse here in Evansville, and they have keys to their office, like this master set of keys. Well, her boss keeps the keys in a particular desk drawer, and it's always supposed to be there. And they went missing one day, and and she made the entire office tear the office apart, and nobody could find where these keys went to. And like they couldn't, and then come to find out 15 minutes later, like they just literally just opened the drawer and the keys are literally just sitting there in the drawer, like right when you open it, like just right there on top of the junk. Like it was just it's just there's so many cases of this, but this has just happened to everybody.
Yep. I mean, whenever I was like looking up stuff on this, disappearing object phenomenon, and I love that the abbreviation online is DOP.
Yeah, it's called the Dopp effect, or even the Doppler effect, which not to be confused with the other type of Doppler effect, which is like sound sounding differently, whether or not it's closer to you or farther away. Like with an ambulance, it sounds different as it's farther away, but as it gets closer, the sound waves bunch up, so it sounds differently to you.
Yeah,
not that kind of Doppler.
And it was kind of cool because listening to some of the stories, people would like put down stuff, and you're right. It's very trivial things like missing razors or keys that went missing, or you couldn't find the remote, and it's stuff that people are like, probably just misplaced it. You probably just you'll find it. And one of the things I'm gonna be honest with you. One of the things that you want to know what really grinds my gears is whenever you're looking for something and people will be like, it's probably in the last place you'll ever look. And I'm like, for real? Because I'm going to stop looking for it once I find it? Or should I just keep looking for it after I find it?
Or they're like, retrace your steps.
Retrace your steps. Excuse me while I break out my what is it, coonskin cap and old musket and start like following the grass trails and all that stuff.
Just trying to Crocodile Dundee this, trying to track it down. The funny thing that I found about researching these stories, and I'm me, I'm like really like I'm a stickler for details. I always say that there's probably parts to a story that people leave out. I'm always convinced that there's usually some aspect of it that sometimes people leave out. How many times do you think that this particular situation has happened to people? Not one story involved some sort of dad or mom literally yelling, "Well, I know I didn't lose it." Yelled at their kids. How many times does that happen to people listening to this? Where your mom or dad goes looking for something, they can't find it, so they yell at you because they assume that somebody else had to have been responsible, and they're like, "I didn't lose it. I know I didn't do it."
Yeah.
Always excluded from these stories, every single, and I know that it happens way more than it's going on in these stories.
Absolutely. I mean,
Tell
like,
me on mine. Tell me
no,
on mine.
no, I guarantee it. Like, somebody's, they don't even say, you know, or they might just like don't even assume that they lost it. They might just like look inside a drawer, something's gone. They shut the drawer. They walk up to their kid. Where is it? Where's what? Don't lie to me. Where is it? You know, and they just like snatch them up. You know, it's like.
Like, I always hate how they're like, "Well, I know I didn't lose it," and I'm like, "You left me at a Walmart." Like, and drove away before. Like, I mean, like that's definitely something that's happened. Like, I know that's actually happened. Like, my dad took me went to a gas station one time. He got back in the car and then drove off and left me there. And I'm like, yeah, you know, it was only like for like a minute. He's like, he stopped the car. He's like, "Oops." I'm like, "Don't tell me that you wouldn't accidentally lose something." And just, you know, it's.
Oh no, I can relate to that. My grandma left me in a church basement once.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like drove off, went off and did errands.
Oh, absolutely.
Everything was shut down. I didn't know how to get out. Oh yeah, like.
Well, this is okay. Something that I think that was hard for me to wrap my mind around, because, you know, there was a guy that, and I think we ended up when we were talking about for the show, we were talking about how we both listened to this guy. There's a doctor, Tony Jinx.
Yeah.
And he puts out this book called Disappearing Object Phenomenon, where he looked into this phenomenon. And it's a cool book. People should absolutely check it out. And he's even got a really cool lecture where he talks about the stuff that he does in his book. And he goes through like his stuff of saying about why he doesn't necessarily, I would think that all of it is necessarily people like for just forgetting what they're doing. But the whole time he's talking about some of this stuff, it made me think about like people's like the human memory is one of the worst, is just not good. Like, we're not as good as remembering things as we think we are.
I mean, we're as good as the last time we've remembered it.
Yeah, let me or realizing like the concept. Like, I'm gonna ask you right now, how long have we been recording for?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, see, like, you know, or how many times have you blinked in this during our talk?
Why would I pay attention to that?
Yeah, why did you shit? You know, or how many times have you taken a sip of your whiskey? See, these are like, that's my point. Like, when you really start to think about these sorts of things, about how much we do. We've been talking, I think, going on for about 25 minutes, like just not necessarily in the episode, but like just in general.
Yeah.
About that long. And like the amount of things that we've done in this time frame that we cannot remember.
Right.
And I'm just throwing that out there. Like, this isn't to say like, you know, you're just absent-minded. Like our perception of time, and just, you know, like, you know, it's like, you know, like a watch pot never boils, or when we're doing something we enjoy, time passes really quickly, or things like that, or when we're doing something that's boring, time drag, like that things can happen. Like, you know, I don't think necessarily all the time that necessarily it's that we're absent-minded, like it's a bad thing. It's just we might not just be being meticulously careful of what we're doing.
Okay. Well, and so it sounds like, so since we're putting our skeptical foots forward, like, I'll agree with you. No, I'm with you. Like, as me being
forward, put your skeptical foot out,
yeah,
put it in, and shake it all about. Yeah,
for real. I mean, I'll do the conspiracy hokey pokey with you, because like I mean, to me, like that's what it's all about. Like, for me, analysis of understanding what I'm seeing is probably not exactly what's actually occurring. And there's that's totally fine. That's totally acceptable. But
people might not even remember that they did something.
Yeah, but skeptical foot forward, like I said, coming at it from the my education, my experience in life. My first thought is altered states of consciousness. How many times have you driven and you don't remember the drive? You don't remember stoplights. Yeah, you don't remember the interactions. You don't remember if you passed people or not. You suddenly come to the realization, oh, I'm at my destination. And I mean, could things have happened? Absolutely. Right. What is it? The attention focus bias thing that they do, where like the dude in the gorilla suit walks by. Like you're so busy trying to count everything that's going on, you don't notice that the gorilla walks by. So, and granted, that only happens. I think that dude even brings it up in that lecture, about that. So I mean, like we have to understand: is this a foolproof system? No, but what what that guy actually was speaking about in his book is Jinx, right? Yeah. So like what Jinx was talking about though is that he took all those ones that were basically weak and he threw them out. Like he actually vetted them. He did a lot. He talked to a lot. It was highly time consuming. Mm-hmm. So the ones he actually got were ones that sounded actually for real, that actually sounded, okay, no, this person actually does sound like that they weren't hitting the bottle too hard. They're not like close to like Alzheimer's dementia type range. It doesn't sound, and it wasn't like, one of the things he actually mentioned was that the memory recall was rather frequent. It was within like a month or so. Like it wasn't like years of falsely remembering this stuff. It was like, no, that just happened. Like it just happened. Now, granted, that's one of the reasons why eyewitness testimony isn't exactly taken in court and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, still, I think from a skeptical note, like this phenomenon takes a lot of flack.
Right, it does, and hear me out. Like the stuff that I was just talking about is the stuff that I don't think comes up as a possible explanation. I probably should have saved that part of the left. Don't get me guys. We're gonna get to some of the more like fun, interesting, like just way out there theories. We're getting there. It's just this just jumped out at me just really quickly because I was listening to this particular lecture this morning from Jinx, and so Dr. Jinx, and that's why it jumped up because that was my biggest critique of the whole thing, and this was just something that he does not talk about, and I don't think he brings this up in his book either. When I was looking at excerpts from it, was how like the human brain cannot handle like just not knowing something. Like we can't handle we need to see patterns. That's a thing. That's why there's this whole concept of where we see faces and things called pareidolia that they call it. That's why when you look at clouds, you think that they look like something, that it's a rabbit, a star, a ship or something. That's why we do that. Or all the way up to the extreme examples of why people see Jesus and toast, and you have Jesus, Jesus toast crunch, like you have stuff like we can't handle that.
I'm not eating that cereal.
Imagine yourself in a situation where you're dealing with the disappearing object phenomenon, where you go to where you get your keys from the bowl where they're supposed to be, which is a common one that I've heard from people, in the stories where you go to your keys, they're not there. You search everywhere. You know that you just put the keys there, and you find them 15 minutes later, in a place where they're not supposed to be, and you're like, I don't know how that they got there. If you didn't remember putting them there because of not remembering all the actions you did within the last hour, and your mind's racing because it's in stress, it's trying to put everything together. It's like, no, I did not put those there. There's no way. Like you've concrete made the choice, like in your head, I think, of like that's why, and it freaks people out and it creates more. Now I'm not saying not all of these are like that, because y'all heard my story from the beginning of this. There was this freaking apple wine to be there. I'm saying some of them, but that's what happens. I think that people just create this concrete story in their head because they can't handle not knowing. Like I know that was in the the bowl, and then I'm freaked out because I can't find them and they should be there. Even though you may have moved them and you don't realize it, but the more you're freaking out, the more you're just solidifying in your mind of no, it wasn't me that moved it, but maybe you did. Does that make sense? Am I off, Mark? Maybe.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense because like for a lot of people, they can it'd be kind of like implanting a false memory or recalling a memory of when you put it in a certain location because that's what you've done hundreds of times before. And so you think, well, where are my keys? Where have you put your keys 1,200 times? You know, on that same desk, on that same bowl. So the one day where your hands were full and there was a fly that got in your face and you kind of swatted at it. And so you threw the keys on the kitchen table and then you come in and then, you know, it's like, you don't think about that. You just think my keys should be in the bowl. And so you're looking all around, not even realizing they're on the kitchen table. So, I mean, like, no, I think exactly what you're describing can be a good counter argument for skepticism because I like how this theory, how the disappearing object phenomenon theory can, or you know, as far as like where you see it, it can be worked into a lot of different paranormal aspects. There's a lot of really cool ways that we can actually explain or identify things where this occurs, and I hope we get time to get into all that because like I think that's a really cool one. But as far as having skepticism for it, I do agree with you. You need to come at this first and realize this is not going to be all cases. So whenever this guy actually writes this book and he writes down that he had 385 cases that he vetted, understand that those are legit cases, not like we can easily write this off as, you just remembered it wrong.
So the thing that I loved about his lecture and the research that he does was he did one of my favorite, like if I was him, this is what I would have done, where he looked at the types of objects that were disappearing. Like he tried to like quantify, because that's a big part, guys, right? Like the skeptics do, like that's the biggest critique, right? Oh, you guys don't have a whole lot of empirical evidence. Well, that's what Dr. Jinx does, is he decides to create that, he decides to empirically study this. And one of the things he does was he looks at what is disappearing. Like what are the types of objects that does. And I thought that it was really interesting was that the number, well, the top three objects that seemed to disappear was food. That was number one. You didn't find that weird? Like it was food, jewelry, and clothes.
Yeah. Food to me was one of those ones where
and it's so, because again, that's what happened to me this morning.
Yeah.
It was my particular, and it was freaky to me when that happened. Was like, that I honestly, when I looked at that, I thought that it was going to be something more like a household item, which is like, I think it's either number 3 or it's like equal, like right at 4. But like it was food. That was the number one thing that when you looked at these studies that seemed to disappear from people. Do you have any thoughts about why that is, though?
Well, that's the thing, though, is that only reason that would make sense that something's stealing food is because it needs to eat.
Mm-hmm.
It's like whenever you think about, now this gets into like, okay, so we need to explain disappearing object phenomenon. This is not implying food that reappears. Okay, like it's like if you're, you had your apple, you put it on the table. You turned around, it's gone. 5 hours later, it reappears. But it's on the kitchen bar or kitchen counter or whatever. That's not what I'm getting at. But it's like if food just ups and goes away, like whole food, no crumbs, no trace, nothing. Something tells me like it's the idea that okay, something needs to eat, which terrifies me because, okay, whenever you see the reports where people are saying that they're haunted, and it's like, the example of like, oh, my old relative is just playing tricks on me, or
My
grandma
grandmother does that all the time, where she'll say she'll say like that my grandfather is visiting her, or doing stuff, and he's taking his cut.
Yeah,
he's getting a piece.
yeah, and I mean, so I'm gonna assume that those who are dead do not need to eat.
I'm wondering too if that's more because one of the biggest explanations for the disappearing object phenomenon is the borrower explanation, where the person comes into your house, they'll mess with your stuff, and then they won't tell you. And then either they put it back or they just never tell you because they're afraid of getting upset. Like if Vic right now came and if Vic was on the episode, I guarantee you he would be doing the and I'm telling you, this happens all the time. My diet soda disappears all the time in my house. I've been secretly, secretly like drinking all of his diet soda at his house all the time when he's not there, when he's not paying attention.
Right.
And he's like, why is this just disappearing so much?
Well,
I have no idea.
And to me, that just makes me think of that dang episode of Family Guy where Mayor Adam West is trying to find out where all the water's going.
Yeah.
Just pours it on the plant. When I pour it on there, it just goes away. Who's stealing my water?
Or if you have like teenagers, or if you have kids and mom and dad, I always find it really funny when they're like telling their story. They're like, oh yeah, like it was, I had this, I had this burrito, this ice cream in the freezer, and then just, it was there. Then the next 10 minutes later, it just wasn't there. And they're always explaining it calmly. When really deep down, our mom and dads are literally coming out looking like a Street Fighter character ready to fight, being like, who ate the ice cream? Like, and what kid or roommate's going to admit to that when you're freaking out like that? Who wants to admit to that? I'm just saying. But what I will say though, in defense of this, because there are examples of this that happen where the person lives alone. Like Jinx had a lot of people in his study that lived by themselves and still had this phenomenon of their food disappearing.
Right.
Now granted, you're going to forget where you placed your keys, but I don't think you're going to forget necessarily, an apple you ate within the same, within the really short time, or eggs, or, or something like that. Or maybe, it's not going to, the borrower explanation is not going to be as easy to explain as, when it's happening in the moment when you live by yourself.
Oh, so you're not borrowing food. I mean, like if something actually takes food and then it comes back later, but it's untouched, like no bites out of it or nothing like that. Like I'd be checking that sucker for like syringe marks. Like I'd be looking that sucker over, making sure. Be like, absolutely.
Like, is there something in this? Like, I'm gonna take a bite, then I'm gonna wake up in a bathtub full of ice, missing a kidney.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah. I laugh and I jest, but I think one of the reasons about why this phenomenon is so scary to a lot of people that is not talked about with this phenomenon is the reason why it's so scary is how in your home, and things are supposed to be where they are. If something comes in and disrupts that, there's a huge sense of insecurity that comes about you from that.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine, it's like, my wife and I talked about this a lot. Like our home was broken into a couple years ago. And, when they broke in, they stole a TV, they stole my Xbox, a bunch of games, some jewelry and things like that. And, it's like almost like 3-4 years later, and we're still just, very freaked out sometimes about that, because, if you feel like something is coming into your home and it's messing with your stuff, that's that insecurity. This is where you're supposed to be safe. This is base. This is where you're supposed to. This is where things are supposed to be okay. And I think this phenomenon disrupts that.
Yeah. And then whenever you try to make like rational explanations of, well, it happens to everybody, that doesn't make you feel any better. Like you said,
No, it doesn't.
it's your stuff. So like the things that turn up missing, like you went through that list, talking about the different items. Observation I had there was, it's all small things. It's always something light. It's always something small. It's not like, this particular phenomenon happens with large objects, like
But yeah,
extremely large objects. Yeah.
You're gonna come home and your house isn't there.
Yeah, driving to my driveway and the house is missing. It's not like that. And so it's not that beam of light, like abduction thing. It's not like there's remnants, like a trail that shows where the thing went. It's just, it suddenly is gone. And some of the stuff that I thought was really cool as far as theories as to why this happens is one of the big ones was if Jinx actually kind of combats that a little bit, I think, in that presentation. But he actually talks about the idea of like the psychic phenomenon of being able to have the psychic ability to move things in our reality, but it's not a trained skill. And I think that that's an interesting take on that, is that like maybe you're underneath a lot of stress, you're dealing with something, and you're just really pissed off because you really don't want to go to work. Maybe you're just like, man, I do not want to go to work today. So your brain's like, cool, we're going to move the keys. And then you're like, I can't find my damn keys. I got to go to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, and to be fair with the skeptic argument, like against this phenomenon, is with Jinx, he's talking about, oh yeah, everybody's really rational. Well, I don't know if he really takes into consideration, like when the time this is happening, whether or not how stressed out or how emotional people were being in that. But
absolutely.
Yes, me and you can be very cool, calm, and rational people when we're talking now, but when we're upset, we're not rational. We lose the rationality. We get upset. Missing time is a huge thing when you're emotional. Like and like it's like that meme where people are like, like, I'm stressed out, I gotta do tomorrow, but I've got a bunch of time, and then like it's like, oh, you blink and then it's like 10 hours later and now you gotta go to sleep. Like that's a thing. And that can happen where you can be stressed out, not remember what's going on with your stuff, mess with your stuff, and now stuff's displaced. And then the disappearing object phenomenon happens. But then when you're trying to explain it, like maybe in his study later, yeah, you're going to be cool, calm, and collected then, and I think it's going to skew your data. But that's just me. But one of the one of the things that he talked about in his book, and this is something that I think is lumped in when he talks about objects reappearing. And this wasn't something that I really thought about looking at this phenomenon when he talks about, like, he looked at objects about objects that appear out of nowhere. And he talks about this guy named Martin, like with an egg, because this has happened to some people where an object that's not supposed to be there is just there now. Like Martin was a person that lived with his roommates. He's trying to make food. He opens his fridge. He needs eggs. There's no eggs.
Right.
He's like, crap. Well, I don't understand what's going on. Like why there's no eggs. Maybe my roommates ate them. And then he turns around where he was doing his prep work, and there's an egg sitting on the table. Where that's happened. Where now it's an object that's not supposed to be there. And this is something that's really weird because he looked at like objects that appeared and out of nowhere. And it followed a similar pattern of the objects that would disappear and reappear, where you see things like household items, food, things like that. But money was the number one.
That was the one that shocked me. I'm like, first off, if we're capable of just conjuring money out of flipping air, man, I think I would have done that a long time ago.
Yeah, and that was the weird, because if you looked at when he looked at his data, and he looks at the objects that people that report disappearing and then reappearing, money wasn't even the top 5. But when you look at objects that just appear when they're not supposed to be there, money is number 1. And he's even had instances where like people report having like they hear a sound, like they're by themselves and they hear like a ting or a ching sound in the turn, and there's money that's there, like either some coins or maybe they heard of like fall, and then they find some cash or something. It's really, and that was really interesting.
Cash in a money clip.
Yeah, that people have found, and that's weird.
It's one of those things though that I think it probably shocks you whenever it's a item that's not supposed to be there, but then it's also an item that you're all like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
So like for example, whenever I go out in my backyard and I'm like cleaning up sticks and stuff, getting ready, getting the yard ready to be mowed, and if I'm picking up sticks and then all of a sudden I see like, I don't know, like a Taco Bell bag or some crap, and I'm like, where the hell did this come from? There's not a Taco Bell around here for like 30-something miles. Like, where's the hell this bag come from? That doesn't bother me as much because I'm just like, I don't want this Taco Bell bag. That's not important to me. But if I went out there and then there was like a brick of gold or something like that, I'd be like, wait a second. Like where did this come from? Because like that's actually something of value to me. So that's going to actually register more as a memory. You're gonna focus more on that one because that one meant something to you.
And I loved one of the theories that he brings up, but I mean, because he brings this up, this pops up a lot more than when like Dr. Jinx brings this up. I think a lot more than other people when they're just talking about the disappearing phenomenon, because there's the reappearing phenomenon, like where stuff just pops up, and when he brings them together, it creates this really weird thought of, what if the phenomenon, the disappearing object phenomenon, is explaining because sometimes stuff doesn't come back, explains the reappearing phenomenon.
Right.
Like, there's this whole idea that matter can't be destroyed, it can only be transferred. So like something disappears from my house and then it appears at your house.
Yeah. So like, and he kind of talked about that one as like the theory of equal exchange with objects disappearing and then reappearing. It's almost like something traded with you. Now, this to me makes me think of like, okay, maybe I play a little bit too much video games, I don't know, but like anytime you're into something like World of Warcraft or something like that, and then this like, there's always that one weird character, or like any game you play where the one thing they want to trade with you is something that you find to be completely worthless. And then they'll give you the most random stuff, but it's something you normally collect and get a lot of throughout a game or something like that. And then you trade it to them, and then they really treasure it. So it's like, what if majority of the stuff that they end up taking is stuff you never even noticed that they were taking until they actually take something that you actually did want, and then you're like, wait a second, but that was my lunch.
But Dr. Jinx talked about that. He looked at like how significant is the object to you.
Right.
And one of the weird things that pops up is it's rarely ever the very significant item. Not as much as you think. It tends to be more of like, I think he like put it as like, I think he writes it as like significant, important, sort of important, like neutral, like, and he kind of goes like that. And he found that it was like medium to low was always the value that people put on the object that disappears. Right. And I thought that was super weird, was the value that you put into an object seemed to affect what would disappear from you. That it's not my grandfather's statue that I have sitting in my living room that's always there. It's like, it's like my razor, or it's my car keys. But yeah, car keys they're important, but they're not like I don't value them as much as that. If I was going to save them in a burning building, what am I going to rescue? I would rather rescue my grandfather's statue he had than, little miniature statue that he had, than these car keys. I'm not going to run back in for that. And that affected that. And I thought that was super, super interesting. When he was looking at that, because this whole idea of dimension slips, that or there's something going. It's either like dimension slips or stuff's coming from. It's like going from one dimension, then it's coming back to then it's coming back, or there's a glitch in the matrix. Our our simulation blinks because it changed something, and all of a sudden it moves one object to another.
Yeah.
And you've seen that in video games where your character's one place, all of a sudden it glitches, and then you're 30 feet forward.
Right. Or issues where what was that? It was the movie Dogma by Kevin Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy holds, I think it was Dogma, but he was like, what are you going to do with that fish? And he says the word fish, and then the guy's holding a fish. And it's I think that's Dogma. I think that's
it is.
But what was really wild about that whole scene is the idea that an object that you're holding on to could possibly be transferred into something else. That the object permanence doesn't actually exist. That to me was something that kind of rattled me. The idea that there might be consider deities and legends of different types of monsters and mythos that they can actually distort objects or change things out of other things. And something that kind of, I don't know, struck a chord with me with that is just that idea that okay, well, could it be that that idea of I don't know, I guess thinking about if you believe in say something destiny, if you believe that the world is supposed to happen a certain way every single time, or you believe that somebody's trying to rewrite history, what if the way that they make certain things happen is by literally stalling you by whenever you're not paying attention, they just pluck your car keys away, or they just pluck something away from you, and they stall you just enough to make sure that you don't leave the house at a certain time, because if you had, something would have happened to you, or some sort of other butterfly effect thing would have occurred. So it's these small little hiccups guarantee situational placement where we're supposed to be as it is in the universe. And I know that's getting really deep, but I mean,
it is getting deep. Is the universe trying to keep you in a particular place? That's why your car keys go,
exactly.
Yeah. But I find the reason why I find that odd though is the number one object is food.
Yeah.
I don't know how that impacts your. I don't know how that would really impact your destiny, I guess unless it's just delaying the time that it takes for you to complete a task, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Minutes and seconds. That's all I'm saying. Over a course of a lifetime.
And it can matter. They can.
Yeah. Just enough to keep certain things from occurring. So I'm not saying that it's critical, but it's small stuff and stuff that might still get brought back. Like you said, it gets replaced. The trading theory to me is still so bizarre, because then that makes me think of things like fairies, like fae folk or little goblins or something like that. And they're thinking, oh, thank you for this wonderful thing. Here, this is my most prized possession, a random button.
Yeah.
And they just kind of slide that on the table. And it's I don't want that button.
Yeah, that was another theory too. But the theory that whenever it puts a particular supernatural entity, it's always poltergeist. That's the number one. That's the popular theory that they explain, some sort of mischievous spirit that's messing with you in some sort of way that's causing you to lose your car keys just because it's deciding to be a dick, and is doing that. And something that was really interesting, I thought it was cool, was one of my first I guess, introductions to supernatural entities was when I was in college. And it was when I was a sophomore in college, and I was living in an apartment. It was a one-bedroom apartment, but I had like 7 other guys that was living with me because I was a nice guy and people just needed a place to stay. So I had a friend that was 2 friends that were living with me that had been friends before, and I don't particularly remember what went missing. I still to this day I can't remember. But what was really weird was when I said, "Hey, this is weird stuff's getting misplaced." My friend Charles looked at my friend Jesse and said, "Oh no, it's bogey." I think he said bogey, and I'm like, and then they started like talking out loud to Bogey, "Are you there?" I swear this happens, and I'm like, I'm freaked out because I'm thinking these guys are weird, and I don't know what's going on. And then they explained to me that Bogey was a brownie. I don't know if you're familiar with that particular. It's a Scottish type of thing, goblin imp in some sort of way. They tend to be, I don't know, gnomes. Think gnome sized. You know, a lot of times that's how they're described. Generally darker complected, sometimes hairy, sometimes they're naked, sometimes they're wearing clothes, usually rags, and they literally just move your stuff around, or they steal your stuff just to be pranksters. And they're like, "Oh, you've got, he came with us from our previous house, our previous apartment we were at." And I'm like, "What is the?" And I'm like, and they genuinely believe this, and they were explaining that was why stuff was going missing. Fun fact, though, what I learned though about how to get rid of brownies is they have there's 3 ways. There's 3 ways to get rid of them. One apparently is the old superstitious way, which is you leave milk or cream out specifically by a fire or a hearth, like something like that. 2, which will make them happy and go away. Or 2 is to give them clothes, which apparently pisses them off and makes them leave. Or 3 is to try to baptize them. Then they get super offended if they leave. and that gets rid of them.
Interesting.
And I thought it was so weird. That was actually probably one of the first times. It was one of my very first time that I'd ever been exposed to somebody talking about. Cause I had a very Catholic upbringing. It was the very first time that I'd ever heard of anything supernatural entity related.
Mm. Well, I mean, that idea, like whenever I was, in undergrad and I had stuff turn up missing, I just assumed that everybody drank a little bit too much and somebody thought something was theirs and took it home with them or something. I never really thought about the idea of actually something disappearing because there was something in the house. But I mean, whenever you look at the phenomena that's out there, there's actually a lot of cultural stuff about that. There's actually a lot of stuff about like certain spirits or certain creatures actually taking things not just to prank people, but sometimes as payment, like for things like that. And I will say that like that part kind of weirds me out a little bit because like I'll be honest, like I love watching like films that are like here's a video of Bigfoot, or here's a video of a ghost. I always get weirded out, and I don't know why, when people are like, here's a video of a fairy. Like that always kind of weirds me out because I'm all like, that's not one that's really talked about a lot. That's not like, in my opinion, taken seriously enough that people actually like make videos enough of it. Is whenever you see something like that, I'm always like, that's kind of creepy. Like that's a little eerie to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird when more a lot of very like mainstream like westernized minds very much have because I was the same way. I had a very hard time wrapping my mind around this idea that fairies or something could be messing with my stuff. But I mean, some people do take that very seriously. You know, and they do, and I I don't know. I always tell people when it comes to their home, like I would probably be more freaked out by fairies or poltergeists coming into my house than there being these just weird dimensional slips. I just don't know why. Like it freaks me. Maybe it's the just home invader thing.
And I think that's why. I legitimately think that's why, because like dimensional slips, like the idea that we live in, and I like that. I can't remember if it was Jinx that brought it up or if it was one of the other readings that I looked at, but somebody brought up this idea that we can't really live in parallel realities because parallel means they don't intersect. So we have to live in multiple realities that are actually meshing over one another, which to me then means that helps explain the idea of the Mandela effect. Why would you encounter people who believe things differently than you do? Well, maybe you're constantly phasing and shifting out of these realities, like all the time. Like maybe we're always like our perception, our ability to see certain planes of existence, then again brings into ideas on the items than of themselves. How do we perceive the item?
Oh man, it gets so better. I don't know if it's better. It just gets so complicated. So
it does.
When you think about that, it's like you know, your thoughts, your actions create these weird like different dimensions, like an infinite number of just dimensions and stuff, but they're all over syncing with each other in some sort of way, and they're connected, and we could be like entering in and out of these things. It's just it gives me a headache when I think about it. But as a way of trying to explain why you have things like, you know, why you have like the Mandela effect, or why you have glitches in the Matrix, or why you know, we see certain things for a minute and then they're not there, like the lights in the sky, and then they disappear. Like it creates this whole weird a whole episode, by the way, in and of itself. But I want to wrap up talking about one last thing of the disappearing object phenomenon that Jinx talked about, but it didn't get wholeheartedly into it. But I wanted to make sure I saved a little bit of time before I get to some of our final thoughts. I think we've covered pretty much every explanation over the course of our talk. Is the replacement phenomenon that happens, which doesn't happen as often, but I'm very interested in, and I'm very interested in stories of those, where a person has an object, but then they turn around and it's replaced by another object. The example that Jinx uses in his lecture, in his book, is he talks about a woman who had a school book, I think it was. And then it's like in the bag, and then she takes it out of the bag, and then it's a completely different book.
Well, it was a library. She went to the library.
Yeah, that's right.
She rented a bunch of library books. She knows what books she picked out to rent because she checked them out. And then she gets on the bus, peeks into the bag while she's riding the bus home, and one of the books is not in there, and instead it's been replaced by a different book all entirely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And yeah, like stuff like that, to me, it's kind of weird, but it's like, okay, like, you know how we live in an age of cancel culture?
Mm-hmm.
So like certain information gets out there, people are like, no, we don't want that out there, we're going to silence that, we're going to keep that from happening. What if reality started doing that? Like reality starts determining that you're not allowed to have that. Boom, and it just shifts it into something else, like something else that you're. Yeah,
reality is canceling books.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of them out there. It probably should, I suppose, but the idea though, like whenever that was being described, I was like, okay, we can argue that maybe for some reason the librarian checking out the person thought it'd be funny to swipe their book, drop it in a bucket next to them, pick out a book that they really wanted them to read, and slipped it into their bag as a replacement.
Oh yeah, well, or how many times do you think that maybe that that some people like. This happens at the grocery store, maybe, where there's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
the wife picks up Raisin Bran and the husband's like, Lucky Charms.
Yeah, for real.
I have no idea.
Where did that come from?
Like, you put a Raisin Bran. I guess we only have Lucky Charms. I guess it's what we're gonna eat. It's just. I'm wondering if that's sometime maybe what's going on.
Well, but to actually say like it's something like, I don't know. I guess the idea would be that you got something like I actually think I have an example of this one. So I remember going shopping. This was years ago, but I went shopping and I was buying shotgun shells. And I was going to go, and I was just buying target shot because I got a new shotgun and I was wanting to test it out. So I was buying a whole bunch of shells for it. And I went to like if you've ever gone and bought ammunition, you typically have a lot of the same boxes like all in the same spot. Like they just kind of do end caps that way, or they have like sections that you buy in the shelves like that.
Mm-hmm.
But different grades of ammo, like different gauges, they're not normally located like all together. They're normally like sectioned in different spots. So you might occasionally grab a certain box, but pretty often, like whenever you grab something, you read it, you know what you're looking for, because certain calibers and stuff, like you don't want to mix up your ammo. You want to know what you're paying attention to. You're reading it. So I remember I bought 3 boxes that were actually tri-packs. They actually had 3 boxes within 1 box for ammo. And I was buying for 12 gauge. And when I got home, one of them was 20 gauge. And I was like, well, that's messed up. So I looked at my receipt. No 20 gauge. It said 312 gauge. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to return this. Like I was all like, damn, cashier rang up 1 box, boop, 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 and didn't like look at it. So I don't have any track record of it being a 20 gauge. But now that we're talking about this, it kind of makes me wonder. I'm all like, I don't know, maybe the universe was just like, we really hate you today, man, and we're gonna deprive you of a box of ammo that you can use. Something like that.
It's like, yeah, you don't want that. This is what you really want to be a real man.
Yeah.
real men buy this type of bullet.
First off, 20 gauge is like the size of your pinky. Yeah. It's like an itty bitty little shell.
Or yeah. So, all right. So we're getting a 10. So what do you? I want to get your thoughts. What do you think that it is? What do you think that's causing the disappearing object phenomenon?
Well, I know a lot of people subscribe to ghosts. They want to say the paranormal because ghosts are teasing them. But I think that ghosts would come with extra phenomena. You would see other things happening in the house as well. So I can't say it's ghosts. As much as I would love to believe that it's always going to be, gremlins or goblins or fairies, I feel like that those cases would actually be kind of sparse. And that what a majority of these cases are is the reality shifting. Okay. I really do. I think it's the idea of that multiverse kind of theory thing where things just kind of, phase in and out depending on where, like, almost like they have a certain charge. Like right. if the item has enough energy, it can slip in and out for a second or two, but only if it has that level of charge, and then once it does the slip, it comes back, or it does the slip and then somebody else interacts with it and then it changes the charge altogether. So then you don't get it back. And they trade you back something weird like a waffle iron or something.
I think that my biggest critique of Jinx and his, because again, he's the probably the best person that's put any forth any sort of data on this so far within the last couple of years. And we're gonna put, I'm gonna put the link to that lecture below, as well as the title of his book, but which I think you guys should check out. I think human, I think human memory, I think misremembering is probably more common, I think, than people are giving this credit for. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's a reflection of anybody's character. I don't think it's a reflection of anything that's wrong with them in any sort of a way because nobody wants to feel crazy or that's something. I don't think that's the case. I just think that, you know, human memory is already sketchy at best. And when you put undue stress on it, I think it's only going to affect it more. And I think that ends up explaining a lot more of this phenomenon than people give it credit for. That being said, the caveat, I'm in the same camp with you, is I do think there are examples, by the way, I'm going to throw it again, the apple wine situation that happened right before the episode here, I think that you could be right, that there could be something going on with the reality where things are coming in and out. There's a whole lot of other things that come into that. I watched one person explaining that, you know, if you think of the Mandela effect, if you think of people like the man from Torrid, like that story that, you know, me and Vic have done before, you know, or people that have, you know, slipped through time, or they've, you know, they claim they're from a different type of reality, or things like that. Other types of glitches in the Matrix. I think there is something that's going on with that. There's huge grand examples of that. I think that, like, the man from Torrid is one. I think people legitimately shifting is one of them. Mannequin people is another example, like where stuff shifting around. And I think that on the mundane side of it, with simple items like keys, food, simple household items, I think that is what is going on with the disappearing object phenomenon. I think that it's the mundane of a much bigger thing. I think that's what that is. Like, sorry, no, that's not the mundane. I'm sorry. It's a smaller thing. Sorry, of a much bigger thing that's going on. I think. I'm sorry. And that's what the disappearing object or reappearing object is stuff moving interdimensional.
So a smaller symptom of a larger manifestation.
Yeah. And I think I don't think that it's its own thing. I think that the real examples of it is a much bigger thing is what's going on, and I think that's what it is. But what do you guys think? You know, I know Vic's gonna give me his probably thoughts on it too a little bit later. But like, have you guys had this happen? My wife's had it happen. You know, Frank's had it happen to him. I've had it happen. Has this happened to you? Give an example of when the disappearing object phenomenon has happened to you. What do you think that it was? Is it ghosts? Is it fairies? Is it just equivalent exchange? Is it dimensional slips? Like, what do you guys? Is it something that we didn't even talk about in this episode? You know, we talked about all the popular theories, a couple extra. Like, do you think that it's just irrational people are remembering? Like, what do you guys think is going on with the disappearing object phenomenon? Leave your guys' thoughts in the comments below. So we'll go over in the next episode. And that's an absolute fantastic way to show your support. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. If you're listening on YouTube, hit the notification bell because that's the way that you stay up to date whenever we put out a new episode. If you're listening somewhere where you can leave a review, please leave a review. It's a fantastic, great way to be able to support the channel, support the podcast, and all that. Also, I want to take this opportunity to thank Frank. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, man. I know you're always fan favorite, and you're a favorite for us to bring on. Stick around because we have a really cool topic we're going to talk about in the patron section, where we're going to talk about this phenomenon of disappearing stars. This has been something that's relatively new that's popped up. It's a new phenomenon that's popped up where astronomers are talking about stars disappearing in the night sky. So me and Frank are going to get into that for a little bit. And I'm really eager to get his thoughts on it, and I've got some thoughts too. It's a fascinating phenomenon. But until next time, guys, keep believing, because we'll keep listening. All right, guys, we're going to slide into the Pillow Talk segment of this podcast, this part of the podcast. If you want to check out the rest of it, all you got to do is go over to our Patreon and sign up. For as little as $1 a month, you get the rest of this awesome podcast, as well as bonus videos that we put out exclusively for our patrons. I thought a really fun thing to do for our patrons would be to actually put this part of the video or this part of our discussion up on our Patreon and have a video element too. So that way you guys can meet Frank. You guys can see me. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna throw that out there. If you guys are tuning in now, that means I'll go ahead and show you. Me and Vic have talked about 40K. That is my orc army that is standing behind me, as well as my chaos up top. If you look a little bit more over there, you can see like little segments of my like role-playing books that I have over there with my Space Marines and my Age of Sigmar miniatures that I've got in there. So go Stormcast Eternals if you want to see that. So I'm currently recording right now in my house because I don't want to be over there entirely around Vic because he's got that's where the soundboard in the studio with all of our good XLR mics are all set up. So, but we're making do. He's gonna be back soon. He's in a few days, so it'll be fun. So, the topic that we're going to talk about, I think, for the Pillow Talk segment, I thought that it would be really cool to talk about this weird phenomenon that's been circulating in some of the astrology communities for a while, is this disappearing stars phenomenon. Like, did you know about this at all? Like, Frank, did you?
Well, I do know of the phenomenon, but the stuff that I know about it, like whenever I was in my undergrad, of course they want you to have that well-rounded education, and everybody always seems to take biology and chemistry, and I was all like, oh, to hell with that. Like I'm not
physiology.
Yeah. I did. Yeah, I actually took geology too, but I took physics and I took